So what we're going to look at first is just what is it that's happening when we see a group of people designing. So what we see, of course, first is people. We see them inventing. We see them communicating. We see them deciding. They're solving a problem that they don't yet understand because, of course, it's the beginning of the problem, and the problem keeps changing out underneath them. They're creating a solution that they, of course, don't understand because they're just starting on it, and which keeps changing out underneath them. They're expressing their ideas in various kinds of languages quite frequently that they also don't understand, and guess what? Keep changing out from underneath them. Now, if you're designing in software, if you're designing in engineering, if you're doing chemical engineering, biochemistry, your ultimate interpreter is totally unforgiving of error. If you're designing to a human audience, you're really lucky because they will put up with stuff. Okay? But if a lot of design is working in an area where the ultimate interpreter is unforgiving of error. Everybody is making decisions, and all the decisions have got ripple consequences with economic consequences that hit other people, and you're short on resources. So that on one slide, without any analogies, without any metaphors, is what I assert is the problem we're trying to understand. That's the space we're in, and we're looking for language to help us understand how to make this work. I'm picking one part out of this, the five-part answer today. And I'm going to say the good way to think about this is as a cooperative game. So we have to talk a little bit about games first. I've got a grid there, different kinds of games. Cooperative games, competitive games, and so on. I'm going to start with the easy ones. Goal-directed competitive games like chess, tennis. The object is to win the game. And it's very easy to tell. You count the points, you look at the position, and you know when the game is over. There are games that don't have specific endpoints. They're finite. They come to an end, but they're open-ended. If you watch kids playing on a hillside, King of the Hill wrestling, they don't play 3 out of 5. They play till they get tired of it. They play till it's dinner time, gets dark, mom calls them to come in, whatever it may be. Same thing with poker. People don't always play poker till they run out of money. They play till they get tired, or they get a phone call and it's, hi honey, it's 1:30 in the morning. Do you think you could be coming home? And the boss just called, sorry people, it's time to go, So they come to an end. But what's interesting next is a guy called James Carse introduced the notion of infinite games. Games where the purpose of the game is to keep playing the game. The game is never supposed to end. If the game ever ends, it's a fundamental failure in the game playing. And then there, of course, you put organizational survival. Countries try to survive, corporations try to survive, standards bodies try to continue to exist, it seems like that. And we can explain lots of interesting things by looking at these infinite games. For example, career management. So when your kid comes out of college, or when you first came out of college, or for some of you when you first are going to come out of college, that's you, your parents may advise you, don't take the job that pays the most money. Take the job that looks best on your resume and builds your next job. So those are examples of moves in an infinite game. Now, unfortunately, on design teams, we see people playing the career management infinite game at the same time. So we see people on projects choose a piece of technology that's got nothing to do with the project, but it looks good on their resume. And I've seen actually projects fail because the technology they picked was very bad for the project and caused the project to tank. So what we have now then is projects are allegedly cooperative games, but they're threaded through with these reeds of infinite games such as organizational survival and career management. Interestingly, also in this category is product line management. What we find is you come up with a product, let's just call it version 3. Let's pretend you are unlucky enough to have been in the cell phone business a couple of years ago, and Apple comes out with the iPhone, and then you scurry to come out with release 3.1 to buy yourself time to do an overhaul and come out with release 4. So that coming out with release 3.1 is a step in an infinite game where you're trying to buy time to stay in the game. Coming down on the other side, we've got the cooperative versions of the open-ended games of King of the Hill wrestling and poker. I don't have very many examples in here. Jazz music is a great example. For example, it's not the case that the jazz musicians say, guys, we only have 10 minutes till I have to go. Let's get to this next piece really fast. Like last time it took us 12 minutes, let's get it down to 10 minutes on this run, right? That's not what happens in jazz. Jazz, they play until they're done playing. Just at the break, somebody told me there's another entry in here, a World of Warcraft would be an example of people who play a competitive game, right? But they're playing cooperatively with their teammates, and they play till they get tired. So we've got other entries in the open-ended cooperative games. The one that interests me, though, is this bottom right one, where there are a lot of entries in this category. And I was quite surprised. I started off with rock climbing and software development, quickly added engineering, suddenly found that it also applies to publishing journals, theater, putting on conferences like this one, marketing initiatives, and very much, as we saw, startups in the last talk. So all of these things I'm talking about also apply to biotech startups and so on. So if we could get to understand what is this cluster of things called cooperative goal-directed games, or the infinite game, the long chain of these things, then we'd have some language and some facility in manipulating them. So that's the game part. Now what's interesting is when you look at the different kind of situations you find yourself in, there's a vast array of game boards. And the reason this is important is because project managers often think, or senior managers, that there's a fixed form formula for winning these games. And what I want to get in your mind is that's not the case. Just as in chess or in Go, you don't start at the beginning and just lay out a plan and win the game. The game board's always changing. Here, the environment's changing, the problem's changing, the players are changing. There is no fixed formula for winning the game. What I've got here is a very simple grid where I've got number of people that you need to coordinate on the horizontal axis. I've got the criticality or life damage on the vertical axis, and I've got the squares numbered by those two types of things. So if you have a project with 6 people or less, you could put them in a room and let them talk to each other. They ship product, talk to the users. You're pretty much done from a process perspective. But when you go to 20 people, they're not in a room anymore. When you go to 40, you probably have mixed technologies. If you have 100 people, you've got consistency problems, coordination problems, communication problems. So the optimal strategies to use vary greatly as you go to the right on this grid. On the vertical axis, we've got loss of life. So there are design projects, airplanes, nuclear power plants, medical devices, where people die if you get it wrong. You go down to invoicing systems where money's involved, and you might get to, let's say, high school theater, stage set design would be a loss of comfort kind of a project. So we would have different kinds of validation, verification, and damage kind of control behaviors as we go up there. This grid's useful because you can watch projects move in trajectories across them. So I studied some projects in the 90s where there'd be 2 people working on some cool little idea. It would pick up the attention of the entire corporation, to drop 100 people on it, and a short while later, well, a long while later, and a lot of money later, the project would tank. Because the people still thought they were working on a 2-person project. In their minds and in their hearts, they were still on a startup company. For those of you who are startup companies that have gone past 300 people, you should have already seen this sort of thing happen. I was working in a project in the Central Bank of Norway where they were tracking all the bank-to-bank transactions in the country of Norway. They were treating it like a loss of discretionary monies kind of a project with 3 people. I woke up one day and said, wait, these are all the bank-to-bank transactions in the entire country of Norway. There are tens of billions of crowns being moved around. I moved it up a notch. We grew the project to about 20 people, some in Lillehammer, some in Oslo. I moved it again. The point is we didn't have to change the project a lot. We had to change our awareness of the project a lot. Now this is just a simplified picture. The real picture looks a lot worse, right? So I just gave you the simplified view. About 10, 15 years ago, someone cataloged the number of fundamentally different kinds of software projects and came up with 35,000. That was 15 years ago. So I want to just make it very clear, there's not a simple fix for this. If you had your pet strategies that were lucky enough to work on the last project, odds are very high those exact same strategies might backfire on the current project. So that's strategies in games. The next thing, cooperative game. The nice thing about this phrase cooperative game is it brings people issues to the front. In particular, matters of trust. I'm going to just pick out two: personal safety and amicability. This is the question of when something is wrong, and by the way, something is always wrong, right? I hate to tell you your comedy sucks, right? Your jokes suck. I hate to tell you your bridge is going to fall down. I hate to tell you your chemical reactions aren't going to work. You need that discovered as soon as possible. The question is, are the people in the room going to tell each other, and are they going to listen to each other? Is there enough safety in the group to speak bad news? Is there enough amicability to hear bad news? Now, I got to actually discover this and experience this firsthand yesterday. I gave a dry run of my talk yesterday, and at the end of it, one of my friends said, you want some feedback? And I thought, no, shut up, let me out of here. Look, I made it. It was only 25 minutes long. I can speak faster. I can get it to 20 minutes tomorrow. So I said, yes, of course. And at the end of some very, very gentle and thoughtful feedback, I threw the entire talk away yesterday and rewrote this entire talk last night for today. Now, think about that. Here's my friend. What kind of personal safety does he need to be able to say, hey, Alistair, I know you're going to be on TED tomorrow, and it sucks, man. You know, start over, right? So that's very tough, and he's in the audience right back there. And I'll point him out to you later. No, that's very, very good. But there's an example of the need to move bad news fast. So we need to move bad news fast. The last area I'm going to talk about is communication. Here's a quick test. So after your eyes get used to this cooperative game concept, you'll be able to look at office facilities and see where ideas move fast and ideas move slowly. Stairwells are like cliffs, by the way, just to give you an advance. Here we look at a very nice office layout at Thoughtworks in Chicago. It's very modern. I look at it, I see the carpets absorb sound. I see the high ceilings dissipate sound. They have lots of space. They've got convex desks, which are actually pretty lousy because you can't bring a partner up and move your screen forward and get two people staring at it. So you really want convex desks instead of these concave things. But what I also notice, and what I hope you notice, is the two people working on the right have got a very rich communication medium going. They are exchanging ideas enormously fast, and as close as the other person is, there's a real drop in communication right there. So we're going to take a look at those. And I was talking about this, and a very famous person in the software world, Tom DeMarco, wrote on the evaluation of my book. He said, no, communication and information are not like perfume. It's not like they get stronger the closer you get. I thought about that and decided, no, it's exactly like perfume. It's exactly, the closer you get, you see the little eye movements, you can see what they're thinking. So I'm going to take a look and say, if we just look at two people talking at the whiteboard, what do we see? Real-time question and answer. Facial, you can see all the facial minutiae, right? Proximity cues, they lean back, they lean forward. I'm disagreeing with you, I want to interrupt, right? You get hand gestures, you get cross-modality timing. You see people start to speak at the whiteboard and then they pause and then they speak while they're drawing. So they're getting connections across the sound track and the audio track and the visual track. All of these are present with two people at the whiteboard. Now you go to phone. You still have vocal inflectional and timing. You still have a real-time question answer. You lose the facial gestures. You lose the cross-modality timing. You go to chat. You lose all of that. You still have real-time question answer. So you get this curve that drops off. And what's interesting is that's all for real-time question and answer. What do you do if you're in different time zones or you're doing archival type documentation? You copy the same curve and you could videotape one person explaining the design to another person. 3 to 5 minute clips, people are doing that these days. Cell phones, digital cameras, put it online. The people in the other time zone pick it up and you get this. You could use this for understanding customers. When the VP of marketing says, here's what I want, brr, you video it. You don't put it on paper. And what do we put everything on? Paper. The thing that's the least effective of all is what we still are attached to. Okay, it's electronic paper, but it's still paper. The last thing I'm going to bring up is the cost of distance. Now, I know there's virtual teams everywhere, but in the last talk, we heard someone say, It's a shame that we're outsourcing all of these biotech projects because we don't have the opportunity to build the team locally. So distance is expensive. Here's a real short back-of-the-envelope calculation just to give you the cost of distance and communication. There's two people working together in software. They call it programming in pairs. There's other kinds of working together. Let's use that as a reference point. I'll use salaries from the mid-90s, $1,000 a day, fully burdened cost. We'll have a question every 20 minutes. You multiply that by 12 people in a year, and if you move those people apart 1 minute, it's $100,000 a year cost in inadequate facilities. So poor facilities design is costing that company $100,000 a year. If you put them upstairs at a couple of minutes for 12 people, you're going to get $300,000 a year. In facilities costs, costing you productivity. Now, the real bad news is that Kim in this picture is not going to go up and walk up the stairs to ask Pat because the stairs are like cliffs and they stop communication. In fact, research shows that people will not walk longer than the length of about a school bus to ask a question. It's about 10 meters. The communication curve drops off suddenly at about 10 meters. So if someone has to get up and walk longer than the length of a school bus to get a question answered, they won't ask the question. All right. So I talk about all this, and that's kind of the end of the meat, the main part of this design as a cooperative game. I've gone through game strategies, moves. I've gone through different kinds of communication. I've talked about trust. People don't want to hear this in business, especially not in engineering. I mean, it's okay if you're in theater. Theater people are allowed to be people, okay? But engineers are supposed to be something else. I don't know what it is. So I get sometimes these questions. These cooperative game, these people, these trust things, these are fluffy topics. So as my last shot, I just want to introduce you to my friend Fluffy. Fluffy's my mascot. The very surprised person in the corner is the tech person who just got promoted to team lead and is faced with Fluffy for the first time. Thank you very much.